Today, we're going to be making an incredibly simple weeknight meal. Pork schnitzel and oven-roasted Parmesan green beans. Schnitzel itself is less of a food and more of a preparation technique that involves flattening your meat to about 1/8 of an inch thickness, breading, and then shallow frying. This can be done with veal to make a traditional Wiener Schnitzel, or if you're a Midwestern German, you can always use beef and make a typical country fried steak.
I hate to interrupt, but I just wanted to say that the German triangle was an incredibly interesting tidbit that I found in my research for this video. It refers to the area bounded by St. Louis, Milwaukee, and Cincinnati, 3 major cities in America with particularly high German ancestry. I found this tidbit of information on the German American Hall of Fame's website, and I've added a link to it below in the description if you want to read on. Alright, back to the schnitzel.
All in all, this meal will take anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes, so it's perfect in a pinch when you need to feed just yourself or an entire family. This being the case, I think it's about time for us to move on.
Now on to today's recipe, which if we're making schnitzel means flattening our meat. This can be easily accomplished by placing your pork chops between 2 sheets of plastic wrap and hammering out a bit of any built-up frustration. You could use a meat tenderizer, but in a pinch, you can easily substitute with a can of chicken noodle soup, any old bread tin you got laying around, maybe a mason jar if you want to give your schnitzel a hipster vibe, or a medium-sized skillet with a sturdy handle to it. Once you have your meat flattened to about 1/8 of an inch thickness, you'll discard your plastic wrap and place your pork onto a paper towel-lined baking sheet. Take this time now to try to dab off as much moisture as you can with the second paper towel. Remember that when it comes to breading and frying, moisture is our enemy. Hit them on both sides with a bit of salt and pepper and cover with another line of paper towels and a bit more plastic wrap. Take your baking sheet over now to the fridge and let her rest in there in the cold until you have all of the other pieces ready to go. Speaking of other pieces, let's talk about a super simple roasted green bean side dish. For this recipe, you'll take your green beans, which in my case was approximately 2 handfuls washed thoroughly, and pat them dry with more paper towels. Note to self, buy more kitchen rags to be a bit more eco-friendly in the future. But anyhow, all you need to do to prep these beans is to work your way through the pile and remove any of the particularly starchy pieces from the ends. A quick chop to each side and off to the bowl they go. Once you've made it through your pile of green beans, let's talk seasonings. Specifically, for this 2-person serving, you'll add half a teaspoon of black pepper, a half a teaspoon of onion powder, a teaspoon of paprika, about a half a teaspoon of salt, and a healthy drizzling of olive oil. Now, if you can't find your silicone spatula to mix this around with, simply pick up the bowl and give it a good old razzling. Once all the seasonings are all well and combined, you can grab 2 baking tins and give the slightest amount of nonstick spray before realizing you completely misjudged the need for the second tin. An extra dish for nothing. And now lastly, zoom on over to preheat your oven to 400 Fahrenheit, and while that's preheating, you've got plenty of time to start dressing your pork chops. To a bowl, add in 1 cup of all-purpose flour along with 1 1/2 tablespoons of garlic salt, half a tablespoon of paprika, and half a tablespoon of black pepper. Mix that around with a fork, then crack 2 eggs into a wide bowl, careful to remove any rogue eggshells. Give that a solid whisking with your fork until combined with a light amount of bubbles. Finally, let's talk about panko. You could theoretically use breadcrumbs, but trust me, panko is the key to getting an extra crispy outside. Looking at it up closely, you can see that panko has a much larger grain structure, which allows it to interact with a hot oil in a much more favorable way. If you don't have panko, I've found that a better alternative than breadcrumbs is to crush a few handfuls of tortilla or pita chips, but that's a topic for another video. For today's breading, you'll focus on trying to firmly press the dry ingredients into the pork chops. Toss in the flour to set the base, lightly flip in the egg mixture once or twice, and press firmly into the panko to maximize the stickage. Flip, press, and make sure to hit the sides of the pork chop too. Everything needs a little bit of loving here. Rinse and repeat with the others, and that's about it. It might be a bit of a messy technique and leave you with some gummy fingers, but the results are phenomenal. After washing your hands, toss the beans in the oven that you forgot was preheating and let those go for about 20 to 25 minutes. More than enough time to shallow fry our schnitzel. For this shallow fry, you'll add a small amount of high heat oil, like canola, to the base of your pan so that it just covers the bottom. Don't be afraid to do this in multiple batches. Don't make a dangerous situation for yourself where you have a crowded pan and you have to worry about hot oil spilling everywhere. For each batch, you'll fry on a medium-high heat for about 3 to 4 minutes or until you start to get a bit of browning on both sides. Once you've got them nice and toasty as you'd like, evacuate the schnitzel onto a wire rack to allow them to air dry. At this point, check the internal temperature of the chop and make sure that you get about 140 to 145 Fahrenheit. It's perfectly fine because during their rest period, the schnitzel will continue to raise their internal temperature just a bit. Lastly, your green beans can be topped real quick with a 1-to-1 ratio of Parmesan cheese and panko before getting sent back to the oven for just long enough to melt and crispen up. And with all that put together, all you need to do is garnish your schnitzel with a bit of sliced lemon to cut through the fat, and a pinch of cilantro for both freshness and style points. And let me tell you, that panko really crispened up. Let me bring on over the intro mic so that you can get a raw soundbite here. It's freaking crazy how amazing that texture is. And that about wraps up the recipe for today. The green beans played a bit of a supporting role in the overall meal, but trust me, they were plenty savory. Parmesan really helps with that. This meal is crazy delicious, just with the mixture of fried flavors and the freshness of the cilantro. But if you want to sneak in a bit of barbecue sauce, I won't judge. Whatever you gotta do to make it into the Clean Plate Club, am I right? As always, the recipe for today's creation is listed below, and if you are liking this content, then please make sure to subscribe, or better yet, share with your family and friends. Y'all's feedback and support has been incredible so far, and I love sharing this hobby with you. If you have any suggestions, make sure to send them my way in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.